Hello, everyone, or should we say bonjour, because this is the third video of the Enlightenment. My middle school and high school French teachers would not be happy with that poor um, accent, but that's okay. So we talked last video about Voltaire, Diderot, and Adam Smith, and today we'll be discussing three more Enlightenment philosophers. So our first one is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was born in France and lived from 1712 to 1778. Now, we've already discussed a lot of his ideas in class when we brought up the quote that men are everywhere born free, but everywhere he is in chains. So we discussed a lot of the ideas of the social contract already. So this is just some other foundational stuff. A lot to know about his life is that we would find it pretty shocking. His mother died a few days after childhood. And then he grew up and had a companion he stayed with. They had 5 children together, and they left them all in orphanages. So, like, when I first read about his personal life, it was very like, oh, this is very interesting. Not always positive interesting. But regardless, his ideas have been crucial to understanding the Enlightenment and what has come out of the Enlightenment. And he thought that people were by nature all born good. No one's born evil, which actually was against a common belief at the time. And he says, but historical events that were complicated corrupted what society is today. And that's what makes people sometimes not, be good in present day society. By the way, he was friendly with other philosophers like Diderot, who we discussed last class. So one of the books we have here is the Discourse on the Origins of Inequality of Mankind. A key Enlightenment ideal is that everyone is equal. So then where does this inequality come from? And also the social contract that we discussed. Laws are to protect people's property, so therefore we're enslaved by our property. We're enslaved by all of our stuff. And if that's the case, how do we get freedom, right? These are these ideas that we discussed in class a lot already. And the way we get freedom is basically by the social contract, that you're willing to give up. I think, was it Andy used the word exchange, which is a good, which was great. You exchange certain freedoms for a society to work well. And as long as you're willing to be a member of society, you basically agree to this social contract. So therefore, society agrees to be governed by what that general will would be. So it's important to understand that social contract in order to understand Beccaria and his ideas of justice. Beccaria lived from 1738 to 1794. So today we're discussing later Enlightenment figures. And he was born in Milan, Italy. His works were often not really highly thought of in Italy, but the rest of the world where the Enlightenment was going on, they definitely were. He was born to an aristocratic family. He was actually studied a lot of math as he was young. These are all polymaths as well. Rousseau was like a musician and a composer in his free time, when he wasn't writing this philosophy. So Beccaria, what made him change to write about government was basically he read Montesquieu. Remember, we discussed Montesquieu and how he observed different governments, and that's what really changed his focus. So Beccaria thought that everyone is born with free will, but people also behave in a rational manner, and therefore they'll sort of do what's in their best interest. And there's some manipulability here. And with these 3 ideas, he said, therefore people can do things that aren't so good. Therefore, you need a criminal justice system. And you need a system of laws and punishments to keep people from their free will from hurting the lives of others. But, there were laws and punishments before this time, but some of them were pretty extreme, and some of them were all about revenge and retribution. The torture methods, were crazy, right? We already discussed people getting their heads chopped off all the time. And says if people were born with and have, rights, and maybe this is not the way we should be doing things. We should rethink how we think of punishment and things like that. So in 1764, he wrote on Crime and Punishments, which outlined a lot of this stuff. He said punishment should be to defend that social contract that Rousseau mentioned. The type of punishment should serve the greatest public good, and it really shouldn't be so severe. It should be, and ideally, you should be able to reform the criminal. You don't want to just punish them. You don't want to just get revenge, but hopefully you can reform them and then make them a productive member of society again. Sometimes if it's a repeat offender, then you would need to incapacitate them, but doesn't mean torture them. It just means make sure they don't go out and harm society anymore. He thought punishment should be sort of swift to be effective, going to court for years and years, which, may be necessary now, he thought wasn't always the best. And that torture is never really necessary. So he was against all that types of excessive brutality. Let's not, draw and quarter people. Let's not hang them on the rack and all sorts of crazy medieval punishment methods. So he was also against things like the death penalty. He didn't think that was necessary if you're going to respect human life. Because of these ideas, he was known as the father of the Eighth Amendment, which is about against excessive brutality and against, all the stuff that deals with juries and all that stuff. They have a lot of roots to Beccaria. He's also known as the father of criminology. So the Criminal Justice Academy over there can thank their existence to Beccaria. He was well read by the founding fathers as well. So it's no coincidence that these things were eventually put into the Constitution. And when people debate the death penalty today, we could bring that up in class. A lot of times people do refer to Beccaria. All right, one more for today. We have Mary Wollstonecraft. So we have a Frenchman, an Italian man, and now an English woman. She was born in 1759 in London. And she is she does have a famous daughter. If you guys read Frankenstein, her daughter is Mary Shelley, and Mary was her second daughter, and unfortunately she died about 10 days after giving birth to her. But like I said, she was born in London. She found her father to be abusive, and he made really bad financial decisions about farmland. Her mother died when she was about 21, and when that happened, she basically left home and tried to make a life for herself. She tried some work in the domestic area over in Ireland, but she knew she was basically a writer, and she got jobs however she could. Think women weren't really well respected as writers in the 1700s. So she did things like translate texts of other authors at the time. But eventually she did write books of her own. And those books have led her to, many consider her to be the founder of modern women's rights. An example is she wrote the book A Vindication of the Rights of Women. So let's think about this. If the Enlightenment is all about these ideas that people are equal and have rights, then why is some people, whether it's race or gender, being treated unequally? And that's the basis of that. The idea is that men should not have to listen to monarchs, right? As we reapproach ideas of what's the proper government. So if men shouldn't have to listen to a monarch, why should women have to listen to men, right? Let's not be hypocritical here. Further, the idea that why do men have rights? Well, it's because they have the ability to reason. And she went to prove that women can reason too. So therefore, if women can reason, women have rights. And let's try to start respecting them. Now, it wasn't still too many years later that women got the right to vote, whether in England or America, right? It's only been about 100 years. So, but this is what really started to get the movement rolling. So that was briefly Rousseau, Beccaria, and Wollstonecraft. And we'll talk about a few more. I think there's only one more video we have left for this section. And I look forward to discussing this and some of the quotes that we'll bring up that relate to this in class. So for now, I'll say goodbye. But since it is the Enlightenment, maybe I should be saying au revoir. All right, see you next class.